Normally on Bill Lockwood, our friend, your friend, and the friend of America is here on Monday or Tuesday, at least Tuesday, and sometime Wednesday. But something happened. But yeah, we got him. He is here the last whatever day of the month. Bill Lockwood is here. And for those who don't know him, everybody should know by now, Bill Lockwood is the host of Patriot Pulpit and Bible Studies with Bill Lockwood. He's a preacher at Our Park Church of Christ in Texas. And you can support him. Write this down, put it in your calendar. You can support Bill. I highly encourage it. American Liberty with BillLockwood.com. American Liberty with BillLockwood.com. And we're going to remind you of that before he leaves today. Bill, good morning.
Good morning, Jesse Lee. How are you today?
All is well. And you?
Very good. Thank you.
Amazing. And so, Bill, a lot I want to talk to you about in the time that we do have. I want to first get your feedback, your thoughts on the situation with Israel and Iran. The fact that the president went over and blew up the bombs, yeah, the whatever he did, and then the fact that they may have to wait and see, have peace there for a minute. What do you think about that whole ordeal?
Well, it's an involved question with many different sides, but let me just start by pointing out that number one, Israel is our friend diplomatically. Israel is our friend on the global stage. However, there's no biblical injunction that we need to defend Israel because the state of Israel today has nothing to do with the Bible. So that's number one. So the point simply is it's not a mandatory obligation from God that we need to defend Israel. Number two, much of the problem has come about throughout the history of Israel and Iran, and some of it, unfortunately, if not most of it, has come about from the international meddling of the United States. Iran was our friend. When the Shah of Iran was there, they were our friend. But Jimmy Carter and the internationalist cabal that he represented absolutely, figuratively speaking here, cut the throat of the Shah. They betrayed him and they turned it over to the mullahs of Iran. That is the hardline Islamic Republic. So now Iran has been the number one state sponsor of terror. But that is partially because, if not wholly because, the United States itself intermeddled in the foreign affairs and insisted on a regime change. And we changed the regime from the Shah of Iran, who was our friend. He thought we were his friend. He was our friend. He had many foreign exchange students coming over, and he had increased the liberties of the people there, even though it would not be equal to the liberties that we have here. But the per annum income of the Iranian person, the Persians, was increasing. And so the Shah himself was our friend. As a matter of fact, I read a book, and I recommend it to people if they can still get it. It's written by Hussein Nahavandi, and he was the prime minister and one of the confidants of the Shah of Iran, who was Mohammad Pahlavi, his name was. So he tells the story of how Jimmy Carter's administration betrayed the Shah of Iran, and we kicked him out. He said his wording, we kicked him out like a dead mouse. So there's a lot more aspects to the story, but our entire democratic machine in the United States began, such as the Ted Kennedys began to talk about how horrible the Shah was, and we needed to change the regime, just as we did with South Africa. So then we turned South Africa over, and now we have it controlled by communists. So also the same thing regarding Iran. That's number two. Number three, it has been indeed the number one state sponsor of terror since those days, and it has involved us internationally all the time. Continually, I would say this. So I number one, respect the fact that Donald Trump has had victory in it. But number two, and I want to be sure to add this, I believe it was an unconstitutional act. I do side with Rand Paul and with Tucker Carlson, who took on Ted Cruz, our own senator from Texas, as well as Thomas Massey. It was unconstitutional, but we have not acted constitutionally since World War II. Jesse, we have been involved in war ever since World War II, whether it be Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq. Every one of those wars have been fought unconstitutionally because the Constitution in Article 1, Section 8 says that it is only the Congress that is to declare war. The president has no war-making powers to initiate conflict. He is only the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. So I heard several commentators saying, you know what? Donald Trump is the commander-in-chief of the army, so therefore he can go do what he wants to do. That is false. The Constitution does not allow that. So constitutionally speaking, I believe he was in the wrong on this. And just the same as I did not agree with Obama doing those things, or Clinton doing those things, or George W. Bush doing those things without the approval of Congress. And by the way, that brings us to number 4, and that is, why is it that we are so adamant and insistent upon being faithful to Article 5 of the United Nations, or the NATO treaty, I should say, which is under the auspices of the United Nations, and saying, we're going to be faithful to Article number 5, but we will not be faithful to our own Constitution, Article 1, Section 8. Why is that the case? So I should say I am appreciative of the success of the operation. And I understand that we've been having trouble all the time, but we need to reach back and see, why are we having trouble? Who was the cause of it? And then how is it that we're acting unconstitutionally? I worry that we have gone off the rails on this one, constitutionally speaking.
If we are, and I believe it, I know it, but I've read that. If we didn't wait, let's say the Democrats didn't want the president to do anything about this, and they went the way of the Constitution, and the Democratic and right or Republicans voted against the president doing anything about it. How is he supposed to protect us from nuclear weapons since Iran don't like us anymore? How are we supposed to protect ourselves?
Well,
let's say that
the idea of protecting ourselves, that this is the this is the smoke and mirrors that we are seeing, Jesse. I think it's nuclear blackmail. For example, India and Pakistan were trading blows at one point. Donald Trump said at first, it is not our business. But all of a sudden they said, well, we may punch the nuclear button over here. Then we get involved in it. So why is it that we must get involved everywhere in the world? Why is it that we have not been involved with China and stopping them from having nuclear weapons? Why don't we do that? Why is it that we go pick on the smaller nations, such as in the Mideast, that are developing it? That has been the number one headliner, and that is, if they get a nuclear weapon, they're going to destroy the world. I don't believe it. They may act that way, but I think the best defense is to the best offense is to have a strong defense, and that is, if indeed they began to attack other nations, then we can be involved if they attack us. But I recoil from the idea that, okay, there's a rogue nation over here, over in the Mideast or in the Far East or wherever it may be, that has a nuclear capability, and therefore it is our responsibility with blood, treasure. We haven't spilled our blood on this one, but our treasure, we must go over there and act as the policeman of the world. Why is that the case? I question all of that, constitutionally speaking. And if that's the case, Jesse, then have we not shredded Article 1, Section 8? Have we not just thrown it out the window?
Right. So you're saying that we should follow the Constitution, but if we are attacked, that gives us the right to defend ourselves without having to go to Congress or anyone else?
We still have to go to Congress. Congress has to declare war.
If we are attacked?
That's correct. It
Well,
is
how
not.
about you go to Jasmine Crockett and she doesn't want it?
You know what? Jasmine Cricket, she's just she's just one little squeaky voice in Congress, but it would not be that Miss Cricket would be able to stop that. You know what? And I understand that we are in an impasse in the United States, and that's another problem. And that is, I am not siding with the Democrats here. The Democrats have no fidelity to the Constitution. They are opposing Donald Trump not on constitutional basis, or they want to cloak it that way. They're opposing Donald Trump because they don't like him.
Right.
When Obama had dropped thousands and thousands of bombs overseas in his last month of office, they didn't say anything about it. When Clinton went to war in South Africa, sent troops down there, they didn't say anything about it. They were not going to oppose that. They're not opposing Donald Trump on a principled basis. They're opposing Donald Trump because they don't like him. Let me give you this illustration. You know, back in the days of Prohibition, there were the bootleggers and there were the preachers who were against both of them legalizing liquor by the drink,
right.
selling liquor. Well, that doesn't mean that preachers and bootleggers were somehow in affinity with one another. It just so happens they approached it from different angles, and that is, the preachers didn't want it because of the moral issues. The bootleggers didn't want it because of the money that they were losing. So it exactly is with people who are constitutionalists, such as I try to be, and the Democrats. The Democrats are approaching it because they hate Donald Trump. They don't care about the Constitution. That is just a cloak that they put on at the particular time. But I'm approaching it from the constitutional standpoint, and so I have opposed the going to war or dropping bombs on Iran on the constitutional principle.
So I didn't hear the Tucker Carlson debate with your what's his name?
Ted Cruz.
Yeah. Was Tucker basing it on the Constitution as well?
You know, I didn't hear the entire.
Oh, okay.
But I did hear them spar. They had a segment that Tucker Carlson was sparring with Ted Cruz, and Ted Cruz takes this position. He says, number one, we have isolationists over here. Number two, we have the people who are internationalists over here. And he says, but I'm not either one of them. He says, I'm a non-interventionist hawk. Well, first of all, I want to take him to task on that. This deal about isolationism, that is a crock. I don't know anyone, I've never met anyone, I've never read after anyone who's an isolationist in the sense that they don't want to have anything to do with the world. George Washington was not an isolationist. Thomas Jefferson was not an isolationist. James Madison was not an isolationist. They were involved in the world, but they were non-interventionist as far as involving ourselves in the political affairs of Europe. But the internationalists of the day, from the time of Woodrow Wilson forward, wanted desperately to be involved internationally and to form an international government, which they called in his day the League of Nations. It was not formed until FDR's period, and that would be the United Nations. But nevertheless, the internationalists are the ones who have guided the ship since the days of Woodrow Wilson. Those who oppose it are not isolationists. We are non-interventionists. Don't get intervened in every single war in the world.
Right.
Why should we?
Right.
That's the position. So isolationism is a bogeyman that they've made up to make us look like, okay, we want to put a head in the sand of what's going on. No, I just don't want to be involved and send my sons and daughters overseas or my money overseas to fight every single war that every politician wants to come up with.
Amazing. Why did Jimmy Carter do what he did to bring on this type of situation? Why did he do it?
Jimmy Carter was an internationalist. He was a globalist, internationalist. He was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He was a member of the Trilateral Commission. And their primary goal is to keep America involved, excuse me, keep America involved in wars all over the world continually and keep us involved in the United Nations. So to do that, you have to have enemies somewhere to fight. You have to have enemies. So they always come up with under the auspices of human rights. He said, well, the Shah is not following human rights. Well, number one, even though he may not have been, according to what we would think to be the case, is it our business to go to Iran in the days of Jimmy Carter and say, we don't like what you're doing with your people over here, so we're going to get involved and change the regime? No. Just the same as China has a one-child policy. Is it our business to go to China and say, we don't like what you're doing here because you're violating human rights, you're imprisoning people, as we know they have been since the time of Mao Zedong. They've been imprisoning dissidents in the government. Is it our business to go over there and say, well, we don't like what you're doing here and you're violating human rights, therefore we're going to get involved in this and we're going to change the regime? Good luck with that. You know what? That's what we did in South Africa, and they did it under apartheid. The apartheid thing, we don't like what's happening here, so we're going to go down here and change the regime. Now what do you got? We got major problems.
Yeah.
We have intermeddled everywhere in the world under the guidance of internationalists who don't like the Constitution, who don't want America first, and they want to be an international globalist government, and they want it to be that way where we are controlled by other nations. So Jimmy Carter was all about that. That's what he was about. He was sold to the American people, and it makes me angry to think about, by the mainstream media, who has been lying to the American people all of my lifetime. But he, just like Fidel Castro was sold to the American people as an agrarian reformer, Jimmy Carter was sold to the American people as a peanut farmer from Georgia, and all he wants to do is, he wants to get in there and make everything better, and he's just a simple-minded. No, he was an internationalist, member of the Trilateral Commission, the Rockefeller Organization. He was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He had his fingers in every internationalist pot. So he was controlled by the international organizations. He was not your little peanut farmer from Georgia.
Wow. And so, China, why don't we, since we involved in everybody else's business, why don't we stop China from creating a nuclear bomb?
That's a good question. That's a good question. China has said, just as the mullahs of Iran have said, and the Islamists have said, that they're going to take over the world, that they're going to dominate, and they've done so. China has done that much more effectively than Iran has. China has its interest in South America. They've taken territories. They're still at war with Tibet, the country. They themselves have an aggressive communist policy. That is communism. And here's something else interesting. I'll just throw this in while we're tracking along the way. When back in the day, back in the period between World War II and following, when Mao Zedong was in the mountains of China, and there was a freedom fighter by the name of Chiang Kai-shek who wanted a free China. Which side do you think that we absolutely supported? Well, on the face of it, we supported Chiang Kai-shek because that's whom we should support. But in reality, our mainstream media at the time was selling Mao Zedong as an agrarian reformer, just as they sold Fidel Castro. The New York Times in the 1960s, Jesse, was selling Fidel Castro as an agrarian reformer. That's all he wanted to do, was to come in here and reform the government of Cuba. And they whitewashed him just as they did Mao Zedong earlier. They whitewashed him. And so consequently, even though we ostensibly were supporting Free China or Chiang Kai-shek, we were supposedly giving him guns, but we'd send him guns without the bullets. It's all documented in a book by M. Stanton Evans called Blacklisted by History. It's a story about Joseph McCarthy and how he was so much adamantly opposed to what was going on over there that we were not really supporting Chiang Kai-shek. Well, what happened? Mao Zedong took the mainland of China and immediately exterminated 20 million Chinese people. They have exterminated more people than any regime in the history of the world. And yet we could not wait to get some kind of diplomatic relations with them, which we did under Richard Nixon, whom I count as an internationalist as well, and things have not been the same since.
And so one other thing about South Africa, are you saying that we should not have America should not have interfered with the apartheid thing?
Exactly.
And let
yes.
them work that out, right?
Yes. Yeah. Why should we?
I agree.
Is it to say that I agree with the government they set up? Not necessarily.
Right. That's right.
That has nothing to do with it. I don't agree with what's going on in a lot of countries, but it is not our business to go down and say, we don't like what you're doing here. You have a white-controlled government where the blacks are enslaved down. That's not our business.
Yeah.
So now what do we do? We have the African National Congress, and we supported them apparently, and so Nelson Mandela was a member of the African National Congress. That's a communist organization. And they were necklacing people. They would soak tires in gasoline and put them on the necks of people and burn them alive.
Right.
But he's become a great hero in America because, after all, apartheid was a divided government, and that's wrong, and we've got to get in there and fix it. So instead, we've ended up supporting the African National Congress, and they took over, or the blacks did, and now what do you got in South Africa?
Genocide.
That's right.
Why is it that if they care about the blacks being under apartheid, why is it that they don't care that the white people are under apartheid and they're being genocided by the blacks, and America doesn't care about that? Why is that?
Because if they were to expose that, it would expose, in part, the internationalist plans and plots that we have foiled everything that we touch overseas, because our internationalists who have controlled our government have actually sided with socialism everywhere. You know what? Here's another good book someone might look up. It's written by, his last name is Volkolganov, I believe it is. And it's an autopsy of an empire about the Soviet Union. But he tells the story of the American press in the second or the first 2 decades of the 20th century. The American press was so enraptured with Vladimir Lenin. They were so enthralled with the Stalins of the world, and so they went over there. We had magazine editors, newspaper editors. They went over there, and the Soviet Union that had just had the Bolshevik Revolution, they showcased how great it was in the Soviet Union, even though they exterminated millions of people to get it. And they showcased all of this, and our reporters that were so favorable to all of that came back and said, we like it, we love it, we want some more of it. And so they just talked it up continually. Now, why is that the case? Well, so that gave us an atmosphere to support what was going on over there, at least not oppose it. And that's what happened in World War II. So we sided with the Russians in World War II, even though General Patton, for example, said, the Russians are the ones that are going to be enemies here. But we wouldn't listen to that. We ended up Berlin. They took Berlin, and the Soviet Union set up shop there, and they set up a slave state.
Wow.
But
amazing.
But anyway, that's so we've had internationalists intermeddling around the world all the time and seemingly siding with those who have been the villains.
Amazing. Let me take a quick break. When I come back, I want you to tell the folks how to get to your website and learn more what you're talking about, because this is so much And if we're so dumbed down in America, ain't no way
Yeah,
the
that's
kids
right.
are going to understand. Let me take a quick break. 888-7753-773. Back in a moment. I want to get back to Bill Lockwood. And this is so interesting to me. I hardly know what to do with it. Bill,
Yes, sir.
tell the folks how to get to your website, whatever information you want to put out there.
Sure. Thank you, Jesse. Well, the website, and I don't put articles on it at this time, but it does have a button to donate. It's called American Liberty with Bill Lockwood. So the radio program or it's a podcast rather that I have is Patriotic Pulpit, and it can be found on YouTube, Amazon Music app, and as well as Spotify app. So it's patrioticpulpit.com. And then my sermons in the pulpit, which are the Church of Christ at Iowa Park, is Bible Studies with Bill Lockwood. That's what we do, that one. We also have a website there, Iowa Park Church of Christ website, iowaparkcoc.org, but it's Patriotic Pulpit. That's what I do on the podcast. And then Bible Studies with Bill Lockwood, which I do, were Bible-oriented lessons.
So American Liberty with BillLockwood.com, folks. Bill, all that you're teaching us this morning, this will never be taught in the schools ever.
No,
again.
it will not. No, they will not.
And the young people are taught everything but this. So does that mean that this is never going to change? It's just going to get worse?
Well, you know what? As you always say, Donald Trump is our hope. You call him the great white hope.
The great white hope.
And
over in Europe the other day, this guy called him Daddy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was who was that guy there?
I don't know which one called him Daddy.
I'm trying to ask Derek, but he's not paying attention.
How about the guy with the great hair, James Hake?
Who did?
He'll know.
The NATO guy called Donald Trump Daddy the other day because he settled this thing with Iran and Israel.
Right.
And he was
right.
called Daddy over there the other day. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And he been called King. They had the King Day, no king, but they call him King. They've been rallying,
Really?
yeah, over in this country. And he's the great white hope. What the?
I don't know.
What's going to happen?
I don't know. I do believe in Donald Trump.
Yeah.
But I believe that he has been caught up in the internationalist cog here. So when people see Lindsey Graham, who is an internationalist, and he never saw a war that he did not like, supporting Donald Trump going to war in Iran, something's not right here.
Absolutely.
So, but we have been involved internationally since the time of Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson hated the Constitution, or particularly the Declaration of Independence. And Woodrow Wilson, matter of fact, when he would quote the Declaration of Independence, he would quote it and he would leave out that our rights are gifts from God. He would not. He would just leave out that part. That our rights come from God. But he himself, so that the internationalist coterie was so powerful because it had been since the time of really Charles Darwin, where the internationalist had been dominant. So consequently, from Woodrow Wilson's period through the period of Franklin Roosevelt, internationalists dominated. And in my view, now I know many people are going to jump up and down and think this is wrong, but in my view, FDR manipulated us into World War II. I believe that he wanted us in World War II. They just like Woodrow Wilson wanted us in World War I, the sinking of the Lusitania. So we have in World War II, Pearl Harbor. And incidentally, here's a question for people. Just let me stop there and just come back to that in a moment. Let's just say, for example, that I near in Wichita Falls, and we have Shepherd Air Force Base here. Let us just say, for example, that China and the Soviet Union had teamed up together and they bombed the Shepherd Air Force Base and destroyed the planes and other bases strategically in the United States. Would we not count that as an act of war? I think we would.
Yeah,
I think everybody would
yeah.
count that as, well, that's what we did in Iran. And yet we have the administration saying, no, this is not declaring war. This is strategic police action. I am baffled at that, because if someone did that to us, we would count that as war, and we're all going to go to war right now. But no, we can go bomb other nations, and we don't count that as war. We count that as police action. That's exactly what the United Nations was designed to do, to put us under the auspices of its own ruling elite, to make us bleed our money, treasure, our blood, and we to go around the world, and we are the army of the United Nations. So they put blue helmets on individuals sometimes and send them over there. So back to the period of FDR. FDR wanted us into World War II. He drew up I think it was a 15-point plan for his staff. How can we get into World War II? How can we do it? And so they drew up 15 points on the plan in order to get us into World War II. He had people on his staff such as Harry Dexter White, who was a tried and true communist. He was warned by individuals in Congress, say, you've got a communist here, Harry Dexter White, right in your staff. He said, well, some of the communists are my best friends. You know what? Do you know, on that 15-point plan, if that's the number of points that it was, I think, he followed every single one of them to the T. And you know what? It provoked Japan, and then they bombed Pearl Harbor. So there was a book written, I think it was written by Robert Stinnett, about Day of Infamy, about Pearl Harbor. And so he was a general in I believe it was in the Army, maybe in Navy. I'm maybe mistaken on that. Robert Stinnett. Anyway, he said, I'm tired of hearing people say that we got manipulated into World War II and that FDR wanted us in World War II. So he went back and looked at all the records. He said, I'm going to answer that. So he went back and he said, finally, it went lengthily process, and he finally came out with the conclusion. Do you know what? He did manipulate us into the war, but he said it was for our own good and the good of the world, and we're glad that he did, because it enabled us to stop communism in its tracks, and it was enable us to stop the Japanese from taking over. So it was for a good cause. But he said, well, he did manipulate us into the war.
Wow.
That is not taught normally in schools at all, because they don't want it. But that's exactly what Robert Stinnett came out and said in his book, Day of Infamy. He said, yeah, we were manipulated into the war. Well, why? Because of the internationalists who were controlling our government since the time of Woodrow Wilson want us to be involved in an international global government, and they want us to be the ones who fund it, who support it, who are now, and by the way, here's another one. John F. Kennedy signed a statement it's called Freedom from War. And the statement it said, link the thread. I think I have it right back here on my shelf somewhere. Freedom from War. It was over a period of time to turn over all of our armaments, all of our weaponry, all of our armament machinery to the United Nations over a period of time. Now, what's the point of all of this? The point of all of this is the people who have controlled our government, whether Republicans such as Richard Nixon or George W. Bush, or Democrats such as reaching back to FDR, reaching forward to LBJ and so forth, have been internationalists. Internationalists.
Amazing.
That's what's controlling our government. The only one who has not has been Donald Trump. And he says, America first. No, we're not going to do all of that.
Yeah.
And you know what happens? People lose their minds when they hear that, because this is not how we have been trained, and we have goose-stepped for 100 years. So they say, wow, we just can't have that. So anyway, that's how we have come to the position where we are, and why we have such a divide in the United States Congress right now, even, because the internationalists control. That's what a neocon is, an internationalist, and they want national socialism as well as international involvement.
Is it all about the money and power? That's why they want war? or there's something else they want?
You know, I think that at the root level, many of them want money and power because the international banks, the international banks, going back to the book by Volkoganov that I mentioned, Autopsy of an Empire, he pointed out that the international banks have have benefited financially from both sides in a war. The international banks have. They get so much money from both sides that are fighting each other in a war. They finance both sides.
Amazing.
So it's it's almost like like the slavery question. People are so, I don't know. I want to say ignorant, but I don't want to be too harsh here. But
That's a
people
nice word.
ignorant about the slavery question. Do you know the South had slavery? That's true. Who funded it? The Northern banks funded it. Chase Manhattan Bank gave them the money in the South to not only continue slavery, but to bolster it and increase slavery. It was only within the last 10 years, very quietly, Chase Manhattan Bank came out and said, I think it was Chase Manhattan, well, we're sorry for our participation in the slavery trade. The slave trade was funded by Northern banks. Why did they do that? Because they made money at it.
Amazing.
So now people say, we don't like the South. We don't like Robert E. Lee and all that. You know what? The banks that were located in New York City were the ones giving the money for the slave trade. That was what was going on. The banks were not located in the South. So the banks have made a lot of money on war. Here's another example. Just think about Vietnam. Here's a war that we lost. Is it not incredible, Jesse, that we lost Vietnam, a small country that is probably the size of Oklahoma, and we lost the war? How did that happen? Because it was fought in the halls of Washington, D.C., and not given the allowance to the battlefield commanders to take control and win it. And we lost it, and then we had Saigon absolutely taken over. But another interesting facet of it is we never declared war. There was no Congress, there was no congressional approval of it. LBJ went to war, sent our troops over there. We did not declare war. Korea, did we declare war there? No, we did not declare. Technically, we are still at war with Korea.
Amazing.
We've only had a temporary truce. That is, we're going to cease hostilities. It's a temporary truce. So now, what do we have to do? Well, our troops again, our money. This is where your tax money goes. We send troops over to Korea to defend the 38th parallel. Why did we not go up to North Korea? Well, MacArthur wanted to. He said, you can't win these wars unless you go and defeat the enemy right there on the ground and drive them back. Harry Truman said, no, you're not going to do that. This is not how we're going to fight these kind of wars. And you're going to stop right there. And they fired him, brought him home. And so now what happens? You have a slave state in North Korea. Who's responsible for that? Well, you know what? I think maybe our internationalists are responsible for it.
Amazing. Have NATO ever ended a war? Have they ever stopped a war?
Well, they might say technically they have, but they have always. We're always at war. We are at war today. We have been at war every single year that I have been alive, and every year that you've been alive, we have been at war. How is that the case? People need to ask themselves, why is it we're technically still at war with North Korea, but then we fought in Vietnam? A long, protracted war drained us of all of our resources, our men. It was resisted in the United States. We didn't declare war. Then we fought in Iraq. Then we fought in Afghanistan. Now we say Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, and we go bomb them, and we just continually are a war-making machine.
Yeah.
And I question all of that.
Give me two quick answers here. One is, how should we deal with China? Should we just stay out of their business and they stay out of ours? What should we do with China at this point?
Well, at this particular point, I believe that we need to support Taiwan. I do believe that we need to do that, partly because of our own involvement historically. We need to support Taiwan. We need to cut China off, and we need to take the hardline stance against China, as I think Trump wants to do.
Oh, okay. And Israel, you said something like, I don't remember exactly how you put it, that Israel is our friend and we
Right.
should help Israel, right? Are you saying that?
Well, you know what? I believe that we should have relationship with Israel as our friends. That's true.
Right.
As far as supporting them militarily, I'm not certain about that. I think we should trade with them. I think that we should, if we want to sell them our weapons and sell them, that's fine. But as far as we go to war in support or defense of Israel, I question that.
Should we give them money?
I don't believe that we have constitutional authority to give $1 to any country outside of the United States, any country at all. We don't have a constitutional authority to give $1 to anyone.
Do you believe that this ceasefire thing that they're doing now will last with Iran and Israel?
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
I had planned next year to try to travel to Israel,
Yeah,
so
me too.
to Bible lands. Well, let's go together then, if you.
Okay.
But you know what? I hope so, but I don't know. I'm not certain really how that will last. It looks like it's tenuous in some respects.
Have you ever gone to Israel?
No, I had planned to go 2 years ago, but there was the bombing
Yeah.
in, yeah, right there.
You have not lived until you go to Israel. I
I'd love
have
to do
gone
that.
there and it's amazing. The Bible land, walking through the Bible is amazing, Bill.
I want to do that. I've
Yeah,
wanted to do that all my life.
yeah, me too. When I was growing
Yeah.
up, I was hearing about Israel, and
Hmm.
I finally, God blessed me and gave me the opportunity to go to Israel. And then we sent another crew back over there from here. They went over there, so we got to go over there again.
Well, I'd like to. Now, I had planned to go with a preacher in the Church of Christ. Is a great preacher named John Moore, and he's at the Bear Valley School of Preaching in Denver, Colorado,
Right.
and he organizes trips overseas. And so he has a website called Bible Passages or Bible Land Passages. But anyway, he has a group going next year, and so I've signed up to go. But that was right before all of this happened and
Right.
unleashed, and so I don't know what's going to happen.
Let me ask, because of time, they voted, and the Democratic voted to get a Muslim as their mayor there in New York. Some
Right.
guy by the name Zohran Mamdani.
I saw his name too, and I'm gonna have to look at it and try it again. Yeah, myself. Right.
Are the Muslims taking over America?
Yes, in a lot of ways they are.
And should we be concerned?
Yes, we should.
And why?
Because Islam teaches, I should say it this way, Muhammad, the one perfect Muslim, Muhammad taught that he is at war and Islam is at war with the rest of the world. So they divide the entire world into the house of peace, those who are Muslims, and the house of war, those who are not Muslims. And the goal is world domination. It's the same thing as communism, except it has a religious edge to it.
Americans, knowing that they see us as the big Satan and Israel as the little Satan, they even chanting on our own soil now. Why would Americans vote for their enemy whom will destroy them once they take over?
Well, we have been brainwashed in our public school system for many, many years to hate America, and we've heard nothing but hatred of America taught in history classes, English classes, government classes, whether it be at a high school level or whether it be at a college level. We've heard nothing but hatred of America. America's a slave state. America wants to take over the world. America did wrong to the American Indian, and how hatred of America, it just grows and grows. So that is something in common that Islam has with those people who are teaching in the colleges.
And so they're gonna end up. Will they end up taking over America?
I
And
think I think America will probably be dissolved in some areas, like it's already being dissolved in places like New York. Well, we've got
Michigan,
all right,
New York.
that's right.
Places
We
like
already,
that.
that's correct. They've already got Congress people,
Yeah.
Congresswomen who are hating America,
Yeah.
supposedly representing Americans.
Yep.
So,
Ilya Omar said, who's supposed to be a refugee from a bad country, right? She
Right.
said something like, America is the worst country ever. I'm
Right.
like, so why are you here? Go back to that good country that you're supposed to have been a refugee from. She's in our government, and she's calling America the worst.
right. She's brainwashed by Islam.
But why would they let a person like that in our government?
Well, we have had so many people who are ignorant about these issues. George W. Bush was ignorant about it. He went, after 9/11, they had a big commission and said, well, what's the cause of all of this? And everything pointed to the teaching of Islam. But he did not want to say that. No.
He said
Because
it was
that's
a peaceful religion or something, right?
That's right. So he came out and said it's a peaceful religion. That's the cloak under
Yeah.
which the guise is. So it's yeah.
Be on your website.
The website is I have AmericanLibertyWithBillLockwood.com. American Liberty with Bill Lockwood. That has the donate button on it. And then Patriotic Pulpit is my podcast, and I talk about a lot of different things and a lot of religious things on there. And then Bible Studies with Bill Lockwood. That's what I have regarding the sermons that I have in the pulpit.
Amazing information today, as usual, Bill. Thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you so much, Jesse Lee. Appreciate you.
Same here.
Uh-huh.
I got to
Bye-bye.
take a break, folks. Bye, Bill. I got to take a break. Back in a moment.